Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people just like you and me. My guest today is Jeff Arch, and he's going to tell us who he is, what he does, and what he has to offer all of you who are watching and listening. Okay, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, my first question, it's always the same question. Jeff, how old are you?
I'm going to be 70 in December.
Okay. All right. Well, you get to
Been
stay.
practicing. Instead of saying I'm 69, I've just been all year, I've been saying I'll be 70 in December.
I do that every year. Every
It's
year I say, I'm going to be to get used to it. Yeah.
a weird
Is 70
number.
a big deal for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, in a way that I thought 50 would be and 60 would be. But yeah, I never felt better and never felt more um, satisfied with my life and everything. It could end tomorrow and I've had a good run, but I'd like to go another 20 years. It's just the math, it's just the math. We can all go tomorrow anyway, even if we're 7 years old, but there's just no fooling yourself. And if there's any time bombs inside that we don't know about, you can live another 20 years, but who knows if your brain's going to be there. So yeah, um, it focuses your intention and your purpose.
The number is a bit daunting, I have to admit, 70.
But
But
Mick Jagger's out there at 82 and he's running up and down the stage, and that's a good motivation.
that's part of what this podcast is about, that we can all inspire one another. I love that story about Gloria Steinem when somebody said, "You don't look 40." And she said, "Yes, I do. This is what 40 looks like." Well, Jeff, you're what 70 looks like. Okay.
Oh man.
Almost 70, not quite, but
Oh
almost.
man. All
All
right.
right. All right. So, how old do you feel when you think about numbers?
You know, two answers that came are 15 and 44.
I
I mean,
like
I
those
pretty much I
answers.
pretty much live like an unsupervised teenager right now. And it's a lot of, I have my own place, I have two dogs. Um, and if you saw this place at night, it's like filled with blue lights and crazy stuff. And so and they do this kind of, they do say, I just saw recently that we sort of, no matter how much work we do on ourselves and all the clearing and all that stuff, that we still pretty much, wherever our most significant trauma happened, there's a part of us that'll always be that age. So in a lot of ways, I'm always going to be 15 because that's the first significant trauma that happened, and lost my dad at 15. So there's probably a part that stayed at teenager, and but also I picked 44 because I just remember being 44 and feeling great, and career and my friendships and like every aspect of life. My marriage was not doing great, but and every other way, physically, mentally, healthy. I felt great at 44. And I thought then, and I think now, if I could have locked it in then, that's the year I would repeat every year.
Wow.
And
That's, yeah.
my kids
Yeah.
were 10 and 6 or something like that. And, they're still in the car, they haven't been in anybody's car yet, just your whole world is just kind of there and contained. And it was just a wonderful time.
Mhm. Okay. Have you ever lied about your age?
I don't know. No.
Okay.
I mean, not even to get into movie theaters or get whatever. That's no, no.
It might be more of a female thing. I certainly did when I was a teenager. What for you, Jeff, now is the most challenging thing about being a person of age?
Um, wow. Well, I think it's this sense of not really irrelevance because society sort of says once you hit 65, you've done your bit, you can chill, if you're set up. Um, but just knowing that there were certain things about the old ways that aren't coming back, and not dramatically, but life is being run by 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds now. The whole world is. And the funny thing is that when I was in my 30s, there's a there's a photo on the set of Sleepless in Seattle, and everybody, we were all in our 20s and 30s when we made that movie. And at the time, I was what, 37, 38 when they shot that movie. And at the time I thought, we're the inheritors of this whole business, and all these old guys at 60 and stuff, like who the hell are they and what do they know? Now that I'm on that side and I look at these pictures of how young we were and how many millions of dollars that we were trusted with, I go, who the hell would have given them all that responsibility, those kids? And so that's the perspective that, if you spend your life trying to cultivate wisdom, uh, by the time you get to a certain point, you might have some. And then it's trying to find people, not trying to find people, but people finding you, whatever, who want to hear it.
Exactly. That's exactly. I mean, the good news is we've learned a lot and we have a lot to offer. And sometimes the bad news is they're not listening. They don't care
And like
because
a
they
lot
don't
of
believe us, for one thing.
you might be this way too. Like a lot of people, now that we're this age, we kind of wish we didn't ignore people who were this age when we were young because we thought their stories were irrelevant and all that stuff. And oh my God, would I like to pick some of the brains of the people that were my age when I was a kid. You just figure they're in their world, they don't know anything. And man, that was a mistake.
Yeah. And it is one that almost all of us make. Sometimes when I think about attitudes that I encounter as a person of age and I am feeling ignored or patronized or whatever, and I think, Robin, you did it too. I mean, this is just what we do. When we're young, I don't think we can afford to think about getting old, being old, what that perspective and
Well,
wealth
you know,
and
that's you.
position.
Do you have kids? Do you have grandchildren?
Yes. And my daughter is the producer here.
Oh.
She's the one you just saw. Yes.
So, oh, isn't that something? So, um, when you're growing up, nobody says when I grow up I want to be a grandparent, you know. But when you get there, there's nothing like it in the world. There's nothing like it in the world. Watching your kids be parents, you change their diapers and you're watching them change diapers. So a lot of stuff that's been happening now is I'm really seeing a lot of things that have come back around. And just this fascination with time and the passage of time and how I can look at a picture of my kid and just say that kid has a kid now. Oh my God. And also the kids that my kids grew up with are like having their third and fourth children. I made sandwiches for these guys, and one of them is like, I had an oral surgery once, and the person that was the assistant to the oral surgeon was my daughter's best friend in, third and fourth grade. And like, you got your hands in my mouth. I remember, making sandwiches for you when you were a little kid. So, and
Yeah.
it just knocks me out. It fascinates me to the point where I probably bore a lot of people talking about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit because people now have possibly caught on that you were involved in Sleepless in Seattle, a lot of people's favorite film. It's certainly one of my super, super favorites.
Glad of that.
Talk about that. Tell us about what that was like.
Um, Trying to, if the short, medium, long version, I was at a point in my life where I had, learned filmmaking at Emerson College, and during my college years, came out to LA to make movies, and I was going to make it in Hollywood. I had no idea how. There was no path, and I didn't know anybody, but a bunch of my friends from college all sort of moved out at the same time, like the summer of 77, 78. And uh, I was a rock and roll lighting designer. I did blah, blah, blah. When I got married the first time, I went back east for what I thought was going to be a year, and it turned out to be 13 years. So I was bouncing back and forth from the East Coast to LA to keep my hand in things. I had a play, an off-Broadway play when I was 30 that crashed and burned. I was one of the people that, that you read about. I had a play open and close the same week. And that led to a lot of soul searching. Not because of the play. I had achieved what I wanted to in terms of like where I am as a writer. Can I connect with an audience? And if you press this button, do they laugh? If you press that button, are they quiet? Do they get emotional? I was on track with that, but I discovered at 30 that I didn't like who I had become. And so I pulled away, and the movie Karate Kid had come out a year before that. And I just loved the idea of, Mr. Miyagi. And I said, I got to go find one of those people. And I did. So the summer I was 30, and actually today's the 15th of August. This is literally exactly 39 years ago today. I had my first class with my teacher who became a father, to me, and um, finished the job that my dad wanted to start. Like I got to turn this kid into a man, and I needed that because I had a little kid now, and things get a lot more urgent, a lot more important. You can't coast. So I started probably not the first time, but a massive rebuilding period where I decided I got to take away everything that I don't like and put in stuff that I do because I had enough experiences that I knew at the core that I was a good person, but everything that come around it I wasn't proud of. I wasn't killing people or anything, but I had really high standards and I wasn't living up to them. Um, so taking those classes led to opening up a taekwondo school, and I was teaching taekwondo. I was teaching high school, and I brought some of the taekwondo to school. I'm the first person that ever had taught martial arts in a Virginia public school system. And so I was teaching kids writing classes and taekwondo classes. About 3 years into that, my second kid was born, my son, and it was having a daughter was miraculous. There's something about him being a son that I thought you really got to step up your game even more now because I didn't think my daughter would ever do this, but I knew that when he was 1 month old, I knew that if this kid finds out that I was going to be a writer and didn't, that I'd be having some fight with him as a teenager and trying to have some authority, and that he would look at me and say, "You were going to be a writer," and I'd have nothing. So I decided to try again, and not because I wanted him to be proud of me or anything, because of course you want your kids to be proud, but they'd have been plenty proud if I just kept running karate schools and everything. Um, so that was the beginning of Sleepless. That's how it started, is that I decided I was going to write again. I saw this is crazy how this stuff happens. He had colic the first 7 months of his life. So and he was like a month old, and I had to pick the furthest room from where my wife was sleeping. And the only way he would sleep is if you just rocked him and rocked. So I'm sitting there, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I see this infomercial for Tony Robbins. And it was the tackiest. It was his first one. He was a kid, and but he was offering this 30-day system. It's the middle of the night. He's offering this 30-day system, improve your life. And I went, I had attitudes. I said, if this guy was for real, he wouldn't have to pay to be on TV. Somebody would pay him to. And then I went, well, that's a nice attitude. Where have your attitudes gotten you? It's 4 in the morning. You're unsettled with your life. You're rocking your kid back and forth. You're in Virginia. This is not where you want it to be. You're making the best of this, but this isn't, this really kind of weird sense of this is not what I had planned for you came through. And it's a weird feeling because you don't know how to confront it. Like, wait a minute, because we're all taught not to be arrogant. And I just go, wait a minute, and I just got it in my head that there's a difference between a life and a destiny. And that takes a lot of courage to just say, you know what, I'm going to claim a destiny. I'm going to go have one. So after that infomercial, I ordered those tapes. You had to call up back then. There was no online. This is 1989, and you had to like make a phone call, and you had to like say to a human being, "I want to order these Tony Robbins personal development tapes." It was really embarrassing. Um, but I made myself a promise. I'm going to go through, unless it's complete bullshit. I'm going to go through this 100% full on, and we'll see where I am in 30 days. So I got those tapes. I sold the school back to my grandmaster, and I rented an office in this little town and said I gave myself a three-picture deal and said I'm going to write three movies in 1 year. And then we'll see. But it wasn't then we'll see. It was like, I'm going to write three movies in 1 year and that's it. When I was 35, I made myself a promise. I decided that my 40th birthday present was going to be a hit movie. So at 35, I said, okay, you got to line things up so that everything leads to that happening, even though the odds are absolutely ridiculous. And even worse, because the first thing I had out was a, gigantic, according to them, a gigantic failure. So I did that. The first movie I wrote was a buddy picture, and it was actually called Cold War Hero. It had a Cold War theme. Two kids in Washington on a joyride, and they were ambassadors' children, and the Russians, I wrote this thing in the fall of '89, and the Cold War ended in the fall of '89. So I mean, we could always count on the Russians being our enemies, and here it is, and it's like, so one question you could ask is, what more proof do you need that you don't belong here? And instead, I asked, okay, forget current events. You can't write about anything that's current because anything that's current will one day be old. If I were a better writer at the time, I would have taken that same script and just make it happen in 1962 because we will always be enemies with the Russians in 1962, but I didn't have the chops then. So now the clock is running. I've written the first one and it's not going to happen, but a lot of people liked it. And it became a writing sample, and I started getting a lot of meetings. And I knew from having meetings that even though they read this one script, all they want to know is what you have next. And I did have an agent, and um, I was going to be coming out to California to pitch things. And I said, I don't have anything to pitch. And he said, well, what kind of movies do you like? Because the question I asked was, instead of when you're going to get the message, it's what's timeless. And I thought, well, love is timeless. Love stories are timeless. So I said, I like love stories. And he said, if you write a good love story, I can sell it. So I went that night. I told my wife, the kids were young, so they had bedtimes. And, I told my wife, go ahead, go to sleep. I'm going to go in the back room and I'm going to think up a love story. And it was January. You asked before about epiphanies. This was like the download of all time. It's January night. It was freezing cold. There was a skylight, and there was this just field of unbelievable stars out that night, incredible stars. And I'm sitting there and I just kind of looked up at the stars and I was getting kind of desperate because I was trying to think of an idea for romantic comedy and there's a formula for them. And I really resisted it. And I really hated this formula because I'm not going to do it the way everybody else is doing it. And it always has two people meet cute, somebody spills coffee on them or they knock them over. And the next thing they're in the same boardroom on different sides of an issue and they have to hate each other for 60 pages. And then there's the big montage and they find out. And it just made me sick. But since that's how romantic comedies are done, that's what I kept trying to think up. The first thing you have to do with any love story is figure out what's going to keep these two people apart. So, and it's always, some issue. Harry and Sally, pretty woman. Well, she's a prostitute and he's a rich guy. Um, but I didn't want to do anything false. And like the night was getting old. So I just remember looking up at that skylight and just thinking, for every star in the sky, there's a good idea. There's a good idea for every star in the sky. And then I just kind of sat there and I tried a little harder and to get these two people to meet in a way that I could handle. And I just said, screw it, man, I'm tired of this. They're not even going to meet. And I thought, that's kind of cool. And then I thought, well, what if they don't meet, but they meet on the last page on top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day? And from that, it was literally like falling stars coming down and just landing in my lap. And this piece of the idea, oh, I had seen some TV show years ago about this guy renovating houseboats in Seattle. So I got it in my head. There's houseboats in Seattle. And I thought, well, to keep these two people apart is the United States of America. It's 3,000 miles wide and they're on different ends of it. And they don't know about each other, but we do. And we're going to play Cupid and we're going to go crazy watching them line up with other people because we're going to know they're the right ones for each other. And I just thought, if I can pull this off, it's going to be a monster. And nobody does love stories where the people don't meet. It's never been done. So everybody said that's, and plus the title, when the word Sleepless in Seattle came into my head in that order, oh my God, goosebumps. I went crazy. I knew I had a hit. Just figured this out. And it really felt like I was getting this message from above. It says, look, kid, you've been a good boy. I'm going to give you one now. Don't screw it up. And that's exactly, I felt like I was given this. And that if I didn't do something quick, somebody else was going to get it. So I wrote that thing in 3.5 weeks with two other jobs and the flu and two little kids and a wife I wasn't getting along with. So it was really, it was intense, but it just flowed out. It came out. I knew what to do. When I needed an idea was there. And it seems like forever, but I finished it. I got the idea in the middle of January. I started writing at the beginning of February. I finished it in April and it sold on Memorial Day weekend. But that, so it's like 6, 8 weeks. But that was the longest period of time I ever remember experiencing because every single day, I didn't know if they don't like this one, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I had one more picture to write in my 3 picture deal. But that sold. And from that, everything took off. Life has been different since that moment. And I did do something no one had done before, a love story where the people don't meet. And it took a lot of the conventional wisdom was you're out of your mind. No one's gonna buy this. If they do, no one's gonna make it. If no one's gonna act in it, actors want to be in scenes together. And if they do, no one's gonna distribute it, no one's gonna see it. You're out of your mind. And I just thought, you do it right, they're gonna come. And you saw what happened. But that was a download that just it was just you're not any big shit, but you're the beginning of this thing that is going to be. You're the first part of this. And I had this absolute sense that this is such a strong idea and it's coming from such a pure place that all my yearning, everything I was going, none of the things in that movie were things that actually happened to me, but underneath the themes, and I wasn't aware of it, were absolutely what was happening. You had a guy who was absolutely disappointed and broken by life, and just all he wanted to do was keep things from getting worse and keep his son and protected. You had someone across the country who had a really good life, but felt she had a destiny. And then you had this kid who just thought, I don't know anything. So if I believe something hard enough, it'll happen. And those three things were operating in me the whole time, and I didn't know it. That sense of yearning that isn't in the words, that sense of yearning that's in the movie, in the spaces, and in between the music and all that stuff. That's what I was bringing to it because I wanted this so bad, and it was so far away, and it was so impossible, and I was taking the completely one in a trillion. I couldn't have made it harder for myself, but I just knew the right people are going to come along and that the wrong people are going to come along too, but this thing's going to shake them off.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
So, Jeff, take that experience, that whole life defining thing that you went through, and I don't know how to say this exactly, translate that for persons of age, where we are now in our lives, because those kinds of dreams, we tend to think of them as things when we're younger, that we have this dream, we have this goal, da 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 da. But one of the things I've learned is that often by this point in life, we still have dreams and we haven't pursued them. And this story says to me, magic happens, dreams come true. So,
Not all by
with
themselves.
all those words, can you make something out of that for our watchers, our listeners, our viewers, whatever?
Absolutely. First, dreams don't come true all by themselves. You know,
Mm,
you got to show up. And I really think that once the universe knows you mean business, it's like you put a down payment of all your effort and all your purpose and all your skill and all your soul and meaning. When you really step up and the universe knows you mean business, it's sort of like this, like these matching donations things. You put in a buck, the universe puts in a buck. So once it knows you mean business, and this can happen at any time. I teach writers now, and they're almost all over 50. And one thing I've learned is that, everybody's got at least one story. And a lot of people, because they don't see their own lives as a legend of any kind, I've had writers come in and they'll pitch an idea and they'll say, well, I want to do this thing, it's in space or whatever, and I'll talk to them for a while and I'll hear something about their life and they'll tell me something. I go, why the hell are you writing it? Write this. Because most of us are led to think that our own story isn't valid. So I'm really happily and helping, definitely people over 50 write screenplays, write memoirs, write their novels. Because the big thing, I guess, that came from Sleepless is, you, like that kid, you gotta believe. You gotta believe this can happen. You gotta believe your life is worth something. And if you don't, no one else will.
So it sounds like the success, whether it's a success in terms of the whole world going, oh my God, this is great, and that may happen, but the real success is to be able to tell your story, to make that dream come true, to do the work that helps you realize your destiny. What you're talking about is a
In my
destiny.
case, success, I think, when you put it that way, I have my own definition, um, younger, and it still holds. But the way you're talking about it, if you can make yourself feel seen and heard, you're a success. It can be one person. My architecture growing up and just the way I came in and the things that happened, and it wasn't this giant traumatic, abusive childhood. It's just that um, it had to be the whole world. I had to matter and I had to, like nobody knows that movie. People are seeing it in Thailand. They don't know it's me. So it didn't really matter that it had to be me that did it. Again, I was the first part of the team that the universe put into action. Um, so sometimes having one person hear you is enough. Having somebody read your story, or even having, some people need the validation of somebody in the business, if there's not in their family that they don't know, who reads these things for a living and says, no, this is good. To be acknowledged and recognized for who you are can be all the reward you need. So there's one thing, I do believe in people. I do believe in their stories, and I'm good at helping them get them out and organize them. And if there's anything I know now, it's the architecture of storytelling and how to take all what's floating around in their mind, and here's where to put that, here's where to put that. What I can't lie to them about is, the market isn't looking for us. But one thing that happens on a screenplay, nobody knows how old you are with your name on a screenplay, and nobody knows how old you are with your name on a book. I mean, look at J.K. Rowling. Um, who know that that was a woman? Who know that she was this far from homeless? Who knew anything? Just like, holy shit, Harry Potter. And that became everything that became. She believed in herself. And one thing is, I noted there is nothing like it when somebody believes in you. But you first have to believe in yourself, because otherwise they won't. And it's a tough thing to do. And if there's anything I really do help people with, it's not the technical stuff. I'm pretty good at that. It is recognizing their own validity. You belong here. You have a story. I'm going to hear it. I'm going to help you have other people hear it. Um, it's not like people are looking for, there's a lot of people, women especially 50 and older, writing memoirs right now. And they're not all going to get published, but if they get written, just seeing your life out on a page like that and just seeing somebody else read it and validate it, there's nothing like it. It's the connection. It's a loop between you and the audience. And it doesn't matter how big the audience is. Again, I said, for me, it had to be global and it had to be joyful. Um, I was 9 years old when the Beatles came on TV, just like everybody else in our generation, and I went with whatever that is, whatever that is, that's where I need to be, in that loop between them on the stage and these audience screaming. But you needed both. And I remember thinking, this is whatever this is where I want to live. And I was a 9-year-old kid, and there was no way to make that happen. So on one hand, my purpose got focused, and I ended up going into filmmaking because I wasn't going to be a good musician. Um, and I wanted to make movies, and I learned how to do that. So the good news is I got to do it. The the price I paid was that if you're not going to be happy until that happens, and no matter what's going on, no matter how much fun you're having, I've done some really cool shit in my life. And no matter how much fun I was having, there was still this thing of, well, you're not there yet. There's a somewhere else that you're not yet. So I couldn't ever really fully enjoy where I was because I was so focused on where I wasn't yet. And I had happiness, I had moments of everything, but I can't say that until now that life has been about joy. Life has been about what I'm here to do. And now I've done, there's still more to do. I don't feel the urgency to do it because I feel more urgency now just to enjoy life, whatever I've got left.
So, Jeff, tell us, you use the word architecture. Tell us the architecture of how you help people do this thing, how you help them, you validate them so that they will feel confident that their story is worth telling, worth writing, worth expressing. How do you do that?
There's a group called Story Summit that I think Julia might know about, but there's a group called Story Summit. It's founded like 4 years ago by David Kirkpatrick, who at one point ran Disney and he ran Paramount. And he was like this when I was in my, days of, rocket launch and in a hot career. He was a feared executive. He was not a nice guy. And you heard his name. You needed meetings with somebody at that level, but you didn't want it to be him. He had some kind of epiphany, and he's now like this gigantic teddy bear, and he wants to. His mission is to take people like him, like me, and some others, and find people who want the wisdom passed down. So he started this group called Story Summit. And the business model was we were going to have conferences like 4 times a year, always in nice places. But the idea was to raise enough money so that people could go for free. We didn't want, especially if you want diversity, let's face it, most of the people that come to these conferences are white people that have the money to go to a conference and, check out for 4 days and go to Maui. We wanted to be able to do that and reproduce that for lots of voices that wouldn't be able to do that. So we started foundations and everything. Our first conference was on a cruise, and there were like 100 of us on this like 4,000 person cruise, and it was February of 2020. We were the second last ship to go out, and then COVID happened. So we couldn't do conferences anymore. And so we had to like look at a different business model. So we started an online school that has grown to a couple of thousand people now. And like we're specifically not trying to be some of the other ones are, stage 32 and some of these big organizations with thousands of people, all this, overhead, we didn't want those kind of headaches. We wanted the people that find us are pretty like-minded. The diverse, the spectrum of like who they are as human beings, but the like-mindedness of we're here to contribute. We're not here to write rip-off movies. We're not here to take cheap shots. So, so I've been teaching there for 4 years, and I've been teaching online classes. God bless Zoom. It has just emboldened all these introverts. And, I don't know that I would go into LA and teach classes, twice a day or whatever. So that's how they find me is through that Story Summit. So some become private clients. I try not to get overextended because I still have my own work, but I teach at that place. There's all kinds of courses, all kinds of offerings, and all kinds of teachers. One of the things I teach is this thing called a small group workshop. So it's a 10-week workshop with no more than 5 people. And we take them through wherever they are, we take them 10 weeks later. And um, so that's how then once the architecture of how they become, more fulfilled writers than they were at the start. The first thing I have to do is get them to believe that they're writers, because everybody, it's what I've learned is, we're gonna express our identity, whatever we think ourselves to be. That's what we're gonna be. So if we think we're a downbeat who's a deadbeat who's never going to make it, that's what we're going to do things that deadbeats do. So one thing I noticed going to all these conferences, going back 30 years now, is that every time there's a writers conference in Maui or writers conference in LA or Chicago or somewhere, there'll be a little newspaper item that'll say, 200 aspiring writers are going to converge on the Hilton this week, and it always say aspiring writers, aspiring writers. And it started to get to me. Um, you've never heard a single thing from an aspiring writer. So the first thing I do is I get it out of their system that they're aspiring writers and just say, screw that. You're a professional writer. What do professional writers do? And then I have to like dismantle the thing that, well, you're not professional until you get paid. Because if you think that, you're never going to get paid. So you take on the first thing I do is strip away this aspiring bullshit and take on the identity of a professional working writer. If you work professionally, you're a professional working writer. And just so
And it's
that
so affirming to be, to be able to refer to yourself and have other people refer to you as a writer. I was at an art class, and the woman who led it, when she tried to get our attention, we're all, doing whatever, she'd go, artists, artists. And we'd all just perk right up because that felt so affirming to be called an artist. Oh my gosh.
and as a writer, I knew one of the hardest things to say when somebody says one of the hardest things to say out loud is I am a writer. So I get everybody doing that, and until they feel it. I'm a writer. How do you know you're a writer? Because I do what writers do. I read, I study, I learn the craft. Nobody can teach you to be an artist. We're whatever measure of talent, God whispers into our ear, that's what we have, but we can all learn the craft.
Mhm.
And anybody can learn the craft of writing, just the way anybody can learn the craft of baking a chocolate cake.
Yeah.
But 100 different people using the same recipe will make 100 different cakes.
That
So
is so true. They have a saying in Mexico, every house has beans. And what that means is
I
they
love
all
that.
taste different.
Yeah,
Every house is the same beans, they
every
all
house
taste
has.
different. Yeah.
I got to hang on. That's great.
This is what a writer does, folks. They write.
Right.
Jeff, we're kind of out of time here. And I want to ask you for my last question, what you would say to our audience today. Okay, what message do you want to give?
Believe in yourself and start now. You have all the evidence in the world. You have all the evidence in the world in your life. If you cherry pick the right incidents to know you've been successful lots and lots of times. And there's no reason not to build on that because we can certainly lay in bed and think of all our failures. Most people spend every night go, here's what I did wrong. We're not trained to spend time thinking, here's what I did right. Here's what I did right. Oh, yeah, I could have, I got into the school I wanted. Well, getting into the school you want to takes the same exact things as getting anything you want. You have to know what you want. You have to have a strategy. You have to implement the strategy. You have to fail a couple of times, see what works, and then keep honing away until you do that. And while you're doing that, you're growing. And that's how stories work. While a character is trying to achieve something in the real world, of I got to win the race, I got to stop this marriage from happening, got to rob the bank, whatever it takes to achieve that, underneath they're becoming something. So you're doing above the surface, you're doing things, but underneath you're becoming something. And so it's who are you and who are you becoming? And we're in control of that. And we really are. Everybody can look at their life and see where they've been successful and say, well, if I look at all the red M&Ms, I'm a success. If I throw in all these, then I'm not. So believe in yourself, come up with a definition for success that you can express every day. That it's not like when this happens, I'll be successful. When I started all this stuff, I came up with the definition. Absolutely, it was forward motion towards a worthy goal. Now, there wasn't a single day that I couldn't do something that was forward motion towards a worthy goal. I knew what the goal was. I knew it was worthy. It wasn't about me. It's about the audience. It's about making them feel stuff. It's about giving them hope, making them feel magic. All the things I wanted to feel, I wanted other people to feel because I thought I was given this talent and this whatever for a reason. I don't think God messes around when they give certain people certain things. So, respect who you are, there's a gold mine, and especially everybody's got a broken heart. Everybody's had their heart broken. And and that's a gold mine, because the architecture of a broken heart is the same
Yeah.
for everybody,
It's universal.
no matter what the degree was. I know I do this exercise with students where I go, raise your hand if you've ever been disappointed. Raise your hand if you ever had a broken heart. Raise your hand if you've ever been humiliated. Raise your hand if you've ever been rejected. And now keep your hand up if you ever died from that. And then what people learn right away is, oh my God, I felt every one of these emotions and I'm still here. And the message of that, the example is, if you dig down deep enough, you get to the place where we're all connected.
Yeah.
And there's not a single human being over 21 years old who hasn't been hurt, rejected, disappointed, betrayed, humiliated, embarrassed, and had a broken heart. That's being alive. And all those things that's your toolkit, that's your gold mine. But we all, and each one of those emotions does have its own architecture. It's like everybody has a phone number, 10 digits, but you got to know the digits, and you have to put them in the right order, and you get them on the phone. So how to communicate with people, um, it starts with you, and what your own identity is. And the thing is, we get to decide that. You don't let other people decide you're a deadbeat or you're a hero or you're a clown. You decide that, and you start taking on the qualities of those things, and integrate them into who you are. And before long, you are that.
It sounds, Jeff, like people who are able to embrace this kind of goal setting and goal achieving at this point in life, that life can change again. Big changes at this point. We don't tend to think of.
There are plenty of examples. There's always some meme going around about, this famous person, Morgan Freeman didn't get his first job until he was 50, his first acting role. And there's all of those things. Mary Oliver, the poet that especially every female, but this wonderful, wonderful poet, I don't think she started until her 60s or something. My One of my friends, she's like a fan of this sculptor, and I can't remember her name, but she's in her 70s. There's only one point where it's too late, and that's when you're gone.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And meanwhile, you can have fun doing the thing you've always dreamed of doing, because what's to lose now?
what's the
Jeff,
lose?
thank you so
Thank you.
much
All
for
right.
being with us today, and for the inspiration for all of us
Thank
to
you
embrace what we want to do and do it.
for the
Thank you, and
chance.
thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Yes, and thank you to all of you who've joined us today. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, is sponsored by Sensationally Silver, a complete hair care product line created especially for people with hair like ours, naturally gray and white hair. Sensationally Silver products can be found exclusively at sensationallysilver.com.
Sensationally silver.